Hey guys, Anthony here bringing you a new video, and first I want to say sorry that most of this video is going to be voiceover due to the fact that when I was doing the engine build process pretty much happened all at work, and it's really loud and noisy at my job, so the audio just did not come out good. I also want to apologize because I didn't exactly plan on making this video, so a lot of the engine building process isn't there. So a good chunk of it is, but a good chunk of it isn't. I had some technical difficulties and also just moments where I didn't record, so I'm going to do my best to try and explain what I did, what's going on throughout the video. Anyways, in case you guys don't know, this is my 1978 Datsun 280Z. This is pretty much the third engine iteration that the car is going through. So when I first got the car, it had a stock N42 block, L28 N42 block with a P79 head, which is kind of a weird combination because the P79 is not a high compression head. It's actually a very low compression head. So mix that in with the N42 block and the dished pistons, created a very low compression engine combination. So I would say at that moment is when the engine was probably the worst, or the car was at its slowest point in its life with that combination. That did not stop me from beating on it at the track though. So fast forward to 2019, and I'm already looking at the next engine combination, which was basically retaining the stock N42 block that I already had and picking up a rebuilt E88 head. And this is when I decided to ditch the fuel injection system, and I went with a triple Weber carburetor setup. However, I soon found out that I actually should have went ahead and rebuilt the block also, because after I went with that combination, the car, you can kind of tell, just never ran how it should have still, especially with a slightly higher compression setup, triple Webers, L28. It didn't feel like all the power was there, and the car was producing a lot of blow-by. So you could tell right away that something was actually wrong with the block. So now fast forward to the beginning of 2023, I went ahead and picked up a completed engine with the combination of an N42 block and an N47 head, and it also had all of the stock components needed for the engine to run. The wiring harness, the computer, it had a bunch of brand new or refurbished components. So enough rambling, let's go ahead and start the engine rebuild process. So I don't have any video of the engine teardown, but as you can see from the picture, the block is completely stripped down, the crankshaft is removed from the block, and so are the pistons. And checking out the pistons, you can see that they are caked with carbon. So a trick that I did was I left the pistons in carb cleaner and let them sit there overnight, and basically came back the next day and the carbon just wiped right off. When it came to inspecting the bearings, all the bearings looked pretty good. I mean, you just had your typical wear, your wear marks, but it was really obvious that we weren't going to be using these bearings again. So my goal is to basically do a somewhat stock rebuild. So when it came to the piston walls, we basically just honed the walls down and just deglazed the walls, and that's pretty much all it needed. So with the help of my coworker, we basically honed the cylinder walls, got it deglazed, and the cross hatching is pretty much perfect, and it gave good insight that this block definitely did not need to go to a machine shop or be bored out or anything like that. I don't have a picture or video of it, but I did also clean up the surface of the block and measured everything, and everything was within spec, so the block did not need to be decked. When it came to the crankshaft, it basically just got polished and checked for the measurements after the polish, and everything was within factory specifications, so nothing was really needed to be done about the crankshaft. After that, there was no need to send it out to a machine shop. This block has definitely seen some better days. The factory blue on the block, as you can see, is pretty much fading away. So of course we want to go ahead and mask off all of the holes that are in the block and make sure that everything is being covered before we start the process of painting it. Of course, I went ahead and power washed what I could and gave it a nice wipe down to make sure that we get a good adhesion. So right here you can see that I'm laying down some black VHT engine enamel, which is basically just a high temp engine paint, which shouldn't flake off with the engine warming up and cooling down and whatnot. So I went with black. It's not everyone's first choice because you can't really see oil leaks, but I think black just is probably the nicest color to do, at least for the way that my car is set up. I didn't film me painting anything else, but I also went ahead and I painted the engine head, the valve cover, and the timing cover, and a couple of other small components. Basically just whatever looked really bad, I went ahead and cleaned it up and painted it, because obviously we want our engine to look as beautiful as possible when it's sitting inside of our beautiful Datsun 280Z. And right here is our finished result. Ignore the Toyota filter. I went ahead and just threw on a random filter to make sure that the oil filter area didn't get any paint. Okay, so right here on this part we are installing some brand new freeze plugs. Now, the trick with removing these is grabbing a punch and a hammer and basically punching the edge of it until it kind of starts pulling out diagonally, and then using some vice grips or pliers to pull off the old freeze plugs. That's pretty much the best way that I found to do this. And then when it comes to installing the new ones, what I am adding to the freeze plugs is basically a aircraft sealant, which should be a much better type of sealant over your typical gasket maker. You want to add it to the inside portion of the block and the outside surface of the freeze plugs itself to make sure that you get a nice solid seal. Otherwise, you could potentially have a leak. So just try and get some on sparingly. You don't have to go crazy with it, but you just want to make sure that the surface of both the block and the freeze plug itself is completely covered to make sure you get a good seal. Now, the way that I'm installing the freeze plugs is I'm basically holding the outside of the freeze plug with a pair of small pliers to line it up inside the block, and then I have a basically a tool that fits perfectly on the outside rim of the freeze plugs, and then you grab a hammer and you just start hammering it as evenly as possible, and you basically keep going until it's nice and flush within the block. And the tool that you want to use, you want to make sure that it does not allow you to hammer it in further than the block itself. Otherwise, you would have to restart the whole process. So you just want to make sure that it's nice and flush within the block. And right here you can see the finished result pretty much. So don't worry too much if any of that aircraft gasket maker is popping out, because you can just wipe it right off, if you don't let it sit for too long, obviously. Again, here is the finished result with all of them on, and you can also see how nice and clean the top of the block surface is, as well as those walls. So right here you can see that we have the new bearings in place, and of course the new thrust bearing as well. And you can see that they are nicely coated with assembly lube. In this case I'm using a product called Assembly Goo, but it's pretty much the same exact thing. And what we are going to be doing right here is we're going to be going ahead and setting the crankshaft in place. Now, before anyone says anything, yes, the crankshaft journals were measured with a micrometer, and the bearings and crankshaft were measured with a plastic gauge, and everything was pretty much perfectly within spec. Now right here we have the crankshaft end caps placed in, and we are torquing them from inside to outside. I did not film me putting in the end caps. I completely forgot to turn on the camera for that part. But yeah, basically you just want to torque the end caps from inside to the outside. And before anyone says anything, I'm doing this during my lunch break. And right here you can see the end caps are torqued in place. And one thing that you definitely want to make sure of after doing this is you want to make sure the crankshaft turns and spins really nicely. In my case, mine turned very, very nicely. Now this is the part where I have to say I'm sorry, because I did not film the process of me putting the pistons into the block or even putting on the new piston ring, so I'm sorry about that, but there's tons of videos online on how to do it, so you guys get the idea. As you guys can see in this picture, I have the ARP head studs installed into the block. So basically you want to clean out the threads as best as possible from the studs or the head bolts. Dip them in oil or trans fluid is what I did in my case, ATF. And basically chase the threads of the block and just install these studs hand tight. You don't want to go crazy torquing them down or anything, because when you go to torque down the head, the bolts that go onto the studs will basically do the torquing for you. But right here you can see the studs are installed along with the Kenmurray ultra thin head gasket. It's like a 0.8 millimeter thin head gasket, or it's very thin. Now for the head was basically decked and machined on the bottom to create a nice flat surface. Not sure if it needed it or not, but I wanted to do it to help raise compression a little bit with the thinner head gasket. And what you're seeing in the pictures is some mild head work. My coworker took the head off of my hands and did some at-home head work. So you can see he did a little port and basically just a cleanup on the head to help increase flow and the velocity. So this should be a really nice head to gain some small power numbers, but nothing too crazy. Now, once again, I'm sorry because I did not record the process of me installing the head onto the block, but I mean, you get the idea. You just pretty much slap it on and you throw on your head bolts. Now, you can see that the cam is removed from the engine, and that's because one of the bolts for the cam towers was just spinning, so I had to install a nutsert, and once I got that, the cam and towers pretty much all went right on very smoothly. A little nerve-wracking the way that I took it off, but you know, I got it done. And as you can see, we have the head just sitting on here with the timing chain in place because I was just making sure everything was lined up and that we were at top dead center. Now the fun part, torquing down our head bolts. So as you can see, I'm starting at 20 foot-pounds, and after this we want to torque them down at 40 foot-pounds and then 60 foot-pounds. And you want to torque them from the inside of the head to the outside of the head. You know, just take your time with it, enjoy the process, and yeah, we are pretty much almost done. So this is where we are currently at right now. Cam is timed. Everything is timed. I'm pretty sure that this chain is slightly stretched. I didn't order another one, but it's okay. This head is most likely not going to be on the car forever. Alright guys, so I'm going to try and film this really quick. So I got footage of doing basically all the timing cover stuff and the head. However, all the footage that I recorded of that process and the intake manifold process, for whatever reason, the footage did not come out that great. So I'm going to try and explain what I did. So when the block was there and it was just the block, the short block, I went ahead and I added the head onto the block with the ARP studs, and went ahead and I torqued it down. I torqued it in the process of going from the inside to the outside. Yes, I know that this is like this. Don't worry. I'm getting a powder coated valve cover in the future with some wheels that I plan on getting for the car. And I'm going to powder coat the wheels and that valve cover the same color. So ignore this. I don't know why this happened, but yeah. Anyways, so I torqued it inside out, which was nerve-wracking. It's always nerve-wracking, torquing ARP studs. But anyways, I went ahead after that, started bolting up some of the just this, and then I moved on to the timing cover. So with the timing cover, and yes, I know this doesn't look nice, I'm going to replace this eventually. It's just these are pretty expensive. But any of the timing cover stuff, or anywhere that has water going through it, you can see, like up here, you can see a little bit of a gasket maker. Same thing right here with the water pump. You can see some gasket maker. Same thing with the water inlet right here, and then up here you can see a little bit. But if you go down, you can see it ends. So there is a water passage right in this area on the gaskets, the square part of the gasket. Right there, I went ahead and I added a gasket maker on both sides of the gasket, and then I did not add any going along the rest of the gasket. You can see I have an upgraded oil pump. This is a I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like Kenmurray or something like that. I also have the Kenmurray head gasket, which is like an ultra thin head gasket. So super nice, should raise compression a little bit. Same thing with the water pump. Added gasket maker on both sides of the water pump. But anyway, so yeah, torqued, got all the timing stuff, put the engine top dead center with the head at top dead center, right? So piston number 1 at the highest position. The
intake manifold, or sorry, the head with the timing, the cam. You need to make sure they're basically like a bunny ear style, like bunny ears. And then there's like a little mark. But once you get everything atop dead center, I went ahead, I bolted everything up. Obviously bolted up the crank pulley, oil pump, water pump, and then I went ahead and I installed the exhaust manifold studs, which are all obviously hidden. So I installed the exhaust manifold studs, and then I went ahead and installed the intake manifold, and I got these ARP intake manifold bolts. However, I had to double up on the washers because apparently I don't know what was happening with the ARPs. They were basically they weren't threading in all the way. They were being stopped and hitting like a wall somewhere in there. So I had to double up on the washers. But yeah, AGR pipe. When I went and started installing this a little bit, it started cracking a little bit, so I added some high temp JB weld right there. This is temporary, so it's nothing to be worried about. Eventually I'm gonna get headers. And obviously the very last thing I did was the oil pan. And on the bottom of the oil pan towards the back, there's like a little line for this final I forgot the term, but I added some here at Toyota we use FIPG, so I added some FIPG along that crack just to avoid any possible leaks. So yeah, engine's ready to go.
Thank you so much, guys, for watching the video. Once again, I'm sorry that I did not record the entire process of the teardown of the engine and the complete reassembly of the engine. Like I said, I tried my best. There were moments where I did record and the footage just didn't come out right. And there were moments where I just forgot to turn on the camera because, as you saw, I did the entire process at work. And as you can hear from some of the clips, it was very noisy. But all in all, thank you guys so much for watching the video, and stay tuned for when we turn the keys on this engine.